And good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's recorded episode of Communications and Cigars. I'm your host, John Crook. Thank you for tuning in to our episode, our show for this evening, and regularly Monday nights at 8 p.m. Sometimes we do them live, sometimes we have to do recorded, but this is going to be one of those recorded episodes. But thank you for tuning in tonight. And tonight's episode is kind of one of those special episodes we do from time to time called On the Tech Bench. That's right. It's kind of a little bit of a special episode where we're going to go and not necessarily talk about communication things, but we're going to dive in to talking about some more technical things in regards to communications. And what tonight's going to be is interfaces for PTToC. That's right. Interfaces for push to talk over cellular. So we did a couple episodes about Nextel. We talked a little bit about Zello, and a lot of people said after that episode, John, how do you interface your Zello stuff? What do you get? Tell me. And I'm going to tell you how I use a couple of items here. And then also too is I got a new item when I went down to Hamcation, and it's being used in an unconventional way, but you know what? I think you're going to go ahead and enjoy it that much. So that's what tonight's episode is. On the Tech Bench, interfaces for PTToC. So normally on Communications Cigars, I like to go ahead and acknowledge all my audiences. Some of the people that tune into the show, you know, I'm not doing this for subscribers. I'm not doing this for anything like that on there. You know, it all started out, I've said the story numerous times. We all started out kind of sitting on that porch in September. It's actually going to be 2 years this September. So all the way back in September of 2021. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, you know, we were all kind of cooped up because of COVID. We wanted to talk about communications, but you know what? There's a difference between talking about communications and actually communicating. And that's where this whole kind of show came from. And then people said, you got to get off Facebook, John, get off Facebook, bring your show to YouTube. We brought the show to YouTube and we started to grow and we continue to try to grow and everything like that on there. And you know what? The growth has been pretty good. I mean, if you really think about it, we're almost approaching 500 people for being about a year and a half into it. So I think that's pretty good. But one of the things about it is that, you know what? We wanted this to kind of be a place to come, to talk, to do this kind of stuff with communications. And that's where it came into play of saying, hey, thank you to all of you that tune in. Now, I would love to be able to do a show every Monday night. Sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes I have different requirements. As a lot of you know, I'm paramedic and have other things that I'm involved in, and that sometimes takes up my Monday night. And that's what this case is here. I'm going to be helping the community. But, hey, we're going to be in the chat there. So if you are watching this on Monday night during the premiere, that person there, that's me on there. But I do want to say thank you, and I always try to say thank you each week or acknowledge the people that hop in at the show. But this week, since we're recorded, how do we do that? Well, I want to send a special thank you out to 4 people that I was able to find out this weekend. While they were volunteering their time to help with communications, they wanted to go ahead and let someone know that let me know that, hey, I tune into Communications and Cigars. So the following people went and volunteered their time up at the American Birkebeiner cross-country ski race up in Hayward, Wisconsin this past weekend, and actually assisted the EC for Sawyer County, which is Wally Crook, N9VAO. And guess what? Wally is my dad. And these people went along and said, yeah, hey, I tune into John's show and stuff like that. So I was kind of like, wow, hey, kind of cool. I wish I would have been there to say that, but you know, it's kind of a cool thing to get that little, you know, hey, I watched the show. And that's what keeps me kind of going on with the show here is people investing interest and sending me emails or saying, hey, I watched the show. So without further ado, Jason, KC9FXE, thank you. Tom, AC9LG, Sean, KF0DEK, and Shane, KD9NJ. JJ. Thank you guys for tuning in to my show. Thank you for letting me know that you watch the show. It is greatly appreciated. And I want to also say that, hey, thanks for going up there to help this past weekend, for going ahead and doing and supporting that communication event. Sounds like it was a blast. Sounds like it had a good time. Couldn't be there this weekend, unfortunately, but you know what? There's always 2024, so that's what we'll set our sights on there. Now, hey, if you have questions, comments about the show, you want to send an email. I got an email here I'm going to read here that I got. Feel free to email me. Email communications-cigars at jjkcom.com. That's right, communications-cigars at jjkcom.com. That's right. Our channel here is supported by JJK Communications. They are a supporter on there, and they give us, the ability to have all these cool little toys and things we're going to go ahead and talk about to purchase, to use, to kind of educate people on there, the equipment and all this kind of stuff that they have. So thank you very much for JJK Communications for doing it. Now, what exactly people said, John, you always say JJK Communications goes ahead and helps you. What is JJK Communications? Well, they are a two-way radio service provider, and for sales, service, rental, system rental, consulting up in Northwest Wisconsin and West Central Wisconsin. If you want some more information about them or want to reach out to them, feel free to go to their website, www.jjkcom.com. Once again, that's jjkcom.com, and you can get their website and see it from there, or feel free to give them a call at 888-455-5266. Once again, that's 1-888-455-5266, and they'll be able to help you talk about it, whether it's radio rentals, to be able to talk across your yard, or to talk across a large area, sales, service consulting, or as their system expands, think about going ahead and using a two-way radio network. That's right. Cell phones are expensive, but two-way radio networks are not. So reach out to them. They'll be able to help you on that. So before we go any further, I want to take a moment to read this email. And it was just kind of an interesting email. And if you send me an email and I do read it online here, I'm not going to go ahead and disclose who you are. Okay. I like to keep that level of privacy available to you. And because I feel that you're writing in, and maybe this is something that I want to talk about and that kind of thing like that. So the email reads, John, thanks for going ahead and doing the show. It's a really interesting show, and kind of one that I think kind of fills a niche that no one really likes to go ahead and talk about, which is those other forms of communication. There are numerous people that do talk about communications, and a lot of it is amateur. But as you know, communications are spreading out. I recently got my GMRS license thanks to you and your show. Not that it's much, and not that we had to take a test. I just had to make sure I paid $35. But one of the things I noticed that you said on your show about last week, I believe, was that you said that you are no longer going to kind of touch on amateur radio stuff. Can I ask why that is? It seems like you do have a vast knowledge of the multiple different means of communication, and I would think amateur radio is one of them. I hope this doesn't mean that you're getting out of amateur radio. I've seen what you're doing the other hats, that you kind of walk down a medium line and make sure that you don't cross paths. And your show here allows you to go ahead and be able to talk about communications freely. You're not brand specific, as you say, and you're not sort of favoritism of any sort of brand, which is really not seen by many in this day and age. Many tend to favor a certain brand or certain things on there, and we know you have your favorites, but are you getting out of amateur radio? Will you ever talk about amateur radio again on Communications and Cigars? Hey, that's a very good email, and a very good questions that kind of came up in that email. So I feel with this show, there are a lot of amateur radio shows that are out there. They talk about things like that. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of people that have more vast knowledge in amateur radio than I do. I've kind of always been a person that's kind of like the VHF UHF band. Does that mean I own HF regs? Yeah, it does. Does it mean I get on HF sometimes? Yeah. Does it mean I get on a lot? No. Have I talked in a contest or two? Yeah. But you know what? There are others that just specialize with amateur radio. And I could give you a whole list of people that do that. My show's nestled in between Monday nights on some shows that go ahead and take place and talk about a lot of amateur radio stuff. And I leave it to them. Yeah, occasionally will I talk about amateur radio again? Yeah, I will. Maybe more so as like helping events like the American Burkabiner, which is amateur radio based for communications. But am I going to hone in on talking specifically a lot about amateur radio stuff? No, I'll leave that up to the other people. Likewise, some of the other people, they just go ahead and focus on amateur radio and don't really touch any others. I feel that there's a lot of abilities out there of other radio services that people need education on that maybe we just aren't getting enough for. And that's why I like Communications Cigars to start focusing. I know some people talk about GMRS and FRS. Some people do talk about MERS. But what about business radios? What about scanning? What about public safety stuff? What about the different technologies that are out there that are geared not towards amateur, but more towards business? Yeah, amateur radio's adopted a few of them, but in this case, I think it's good to just kind of focus on this channel here. The other thing too is that amateur radio has its good days and bad days. I think we've all known, if we're amateur radio operators, there are some people who are very opinionated, and there are some people who just go with it. As the old joke goes, hey, amateur radio. If you have 2 people, you have 1 club. If you have 3 people, you have 2 clubs. So I'll kind of leave the amateur radio stuff to the other people, but occasionally from time to time, I may bring it up or I may talk about it. But thanks for asking that question. Thanks for that email. And I hope that answered your questions on there. Once again, if you want to have your email read, like I said, like this person did, or something like that, feel free to email me at communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Alrighty, let's get into tonight's show. Alrighty, so tonight's show on the bench, we're going to talk, let's go back real quick. We had an episode where we talked about Nextel. And it kind of went into a good deal where Nextel came from, the whole fleet call days and everything like that. And one of the things I touched on with Nextel, which I was happy to be part of working in the two-way radio field, was how Nextel was able to create some interfaces over to two-way radio devices. Like, they were literally taking a Nextel, plugging it into a cable, which would go into a device, and then it goes out from there. Right? Well, with that being said, Nextel's obviously long and gone. And I did bring up an episode about a company called, Zello. Now, Zello has a free service, and Zello has a Zello for Work service. Zello for Work you pay for. But with Zello for Work, and even with Zello, the free services, you kind of can make some crossovers. Now, crossovers, or gateways as they're usually referred to as, is basically taking RF radio, connecting it via wires to some sort of interface connection device, and then you could use your push-to-talk device to go through the cellular, the Wi-Fi, whatever, the IP-based network that goes into a device, which then crosses it over from an IP connection over to an RF connection. Now, people said, I want to know what your interfaces are. I would like to know what your gateways are, those kind of things like that. And I figured, you know what? Hey, this is a good time to talk about it, because not only do I have one gateway I'm going to talk about, but I also picked up another one at Hamcation. So, without further ado, let's jump into some of the devices that we're talking about. And we have 2. Now, before we get into these devices, I want to go ahead and basically let people know, I do not work for any of these companies that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 2 of them tonight with their products. I don't work for them. They have not given me sponsorship. All the stuff that I have and I am talking about tonight, I've purchased on my own, and I have not gone ahead and asked for any sort of compensation or anything like that whatsoever out there. So just want to go ahead and let that know, because sometimes people will talk about a product and then they'll be like, well, yeah, they got compensation for it the way it is. No, I'll go ahead and tell you some of the things that I use it on there. Now, is there always going to be bad things with things? Yes, there is. But unless it's a bad thing or something to be aware of, I'm probably not going to bring it up. And the reason I'm not going to bring it up is because, guess what? When you're using things, especially like in this case, different interfaces and stuff like that, they are all designed to work differently based on the application that you have. So you can't really fault and say something isn't working or something isn't right because you're trying to use it outside of the application that it was actually designed for. So I just want to go ahead and clarify the air, because I think that's really important to have that truth in there and stuff. I know some people that I would consider my friends that are YouTubers. They have stuff sent to them for reviews. They're very open about saying, I had this sent for a review and that kind of thing like that. But for me, tonight, we're not reviewing. We're getting on the tech bench. We're getting really deep into there. So without further ado, First one we're going to talk about is the URIx-B. So I actually have the URIx device. It's the one here. It's not the B version on here. And what this device really is it is a basic interface between your radio and your computer to be able to take your radio and have it modified, however you want to say it, then they're transformed into a gateway. And the gateway concept is pretty easy and simple on there. We're going to go back to the screen here real quick. This is the little device here. This is the URIx, not the URIx-B, so just be aware of that. This is the older model, but I still use it. This older model uses a USB-B connector or a USB printer cable, and it has the 25-pin connector on there. In addition, it also has a listing right on the back of it there of what all of these 25 pins do. Now that is actually kind of a nice kind of thing on there, because when you're taking a look at this device, it allows you to, once again, to basically plug the USB into some sort of device, whether it be the computer, Raspberry Pi, whatever the case may be. And then it will allow you to go ahead and turn it into this interface where you interface the radio via the DB25 pin connector. Pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It has a lot of features in there. Now, one of the things that I'm going to go ahead and tell you about is what the cost is of the time of this video here. So at the time, they have two versions of the URIx-B. The first version here is $149.95. Now, this is considered the commercial version. There is a version that is a little bit cheaper if you are a licensed amateur radio operator. I'm showing you the higher price with the commercial version, the non-amateur version, because if you're going to be using this, which some people do for linking for GMRS, linking for some business stuff, whatever the case may be, this is going to be the commercial one you need. Alrighty. Is there a difference between the commercial and the amateur? Not that I saw. Alrighty. Not that I've seen. Now, maybe there might be, and I'm just oblivious to it, and I'm not paying attention to it, but this device will allow you to connect it. Now, as I go out to the website here, I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. I'm going to kind of see thing here. So it comes with obviously the USB cable, which is nice. It does have better audio performance. I know a few people that have purchased the URIx-B version, which is this latest version. They're made in the USA. They have 1 year of a warranty on there. It allows you to literally connect, like I said, to a radio on there. Now, one of the things that you have to do, and this is kind of that drawback with it, is you have to have a program that can drive the functionality of this device. And what I mean by that is that there's no drivers to it or anything like that. When you plug this device in via the USB, it needs to have something to send the signals down that USB to tell the radio to activate the PTT on the device. It needs to say, okay, need to listen to the audio on there. Oh, wait a minute. Core sense is being detected by, so the carrier operated relay or core detect as it's listed on here. Carrier operated relay, hey, oh, guess what? There's voltage on this pin. Now I need to listen to the mic inputs to this device here. So it has a lot of that functionality on there. Now, as you see here, this, I think the second question right off there is question, what type of radio can I use? Look at this right here. Virtually any type of radio may be used, including amateur, business, public safety, radio, plus GMRS. Basically, anything you can do to connect the input and the output, and then the PTT from this to the radio and stuff like that. Any radio can be used. Now, is it going to be once again, all easily plug and play? No, it's not always going to be easily plug and play. That happens. It's going to happen, folks, okay? Some radios will have connectors on there or accessory pins and ports on there that allow you to be able to do that, alrighty? This goes ahead and allows you to do that. Now, in addition, I would say that this is really good for kind of that Raspberry Pi with like Asterisk or All-Star running it on there, but there are more features that you can do with this device. So once again, look at here. hey, can I use this to make a repeater? Yeah, you can. You can have the audio input and output. You're going to have two separate radios. There's going to be a little more into that. You can't use one radio as a repeater, a simplex radio. But this is that device that interfaces it. What I've used this for in the past has usually been All-Star, but I've also played around with it a little bit on the asterisk aspect of things. Now, that's nice on the asterisk part, because when you're using asterisk, it's not All-Star for like the amateur stuff. Asterisk can be used with this interface to be used like a PBX network to interface and connect different ones together. One of the projects I was working on is kind of like a PBX setup, connecting things and making an internet connection of, well, not an internet, but more of a, excuse me, Ethernet connection between them. So each radio would have a node, and then you could just easily connect the nodes together for connecting different devices. Now, we'll tell you this is going to only be for audio of an analog nature. You're not going to really be able to have data come down this device, because I've had people that have asked me in the past, oh, so I can hook a P25 radio to this and it's going to take that P25 signal, the data of the P25 signal, and send it down there. No, it doesn't. It's really designed for audio routing. Now, one of the drawbacks to that is if you're using digital stuff and you're going from a digital signal to an analog signal, or coming out the analog signal going into here, and then you're connecting to another digital radio, you're doing what they call double vocoding. So you're decoding digital, putting it in analog comes in here, goes to the other one of these, this spits it out into the mic jack on there, and then it gets translated into digital. That's called double vocoding, and that could sound really bad. But diving into this, so you can kind of see here, they've changed their media chips on there, so they've gone to a better one. It's no longer a CM108, it's a CM119A. That's kind of good on there too, because we all know the CM108s were dying, if you're familiar with kind of things on there. So that's kind of a good refresher on there, and good knowledge in that regards to say, hey, here's the deal, here's what it is on there. But diving into this here a little bit, taking a look at it. So all the PTT pins, all those that you need on there are actually right on there. So if you look at pin 1 is the PTT, that's going to be your PTT sense on there. So all you simply do is, hey, it's going to go active low on there. So you take pin 1 here and wire pin 1 into what you need to do for your PTT on your radio. The next one, it has some general purpose IO pins on there. So if you have a device or something that can control these, because the newer ones also have the built-in EEPROMs on there, and you can do things with those EEPROMs, such as like change channels, those kind of things like that on there, if your radio is capable of doing it. Some public safety radios have usually 4 pins that if you tap it to ground temporarily, it will go to like channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, however it's programmed on there. Well, guess what? With this GPIO pins, 1, 2, 4, well, actually, how many does it have here? It actually has 8 GPIO pins in there. So there's 1, 2, there's pin, well, actually it's missing pin 3. I see that now. GPIO 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on there. So those pins could be, depending on what you're using to drive this on there, those pins might be able to be used for that. Now, a couple other cool things about this. This has pin 7 and pin 8 here on this model. It has a CTCSS detect and a core detect. This is actually very handy, especially if you're going to be integrating it into the business world or public safety world or something like that on there. You don't want false signals coming in here. This core detect, CTCSS detect, is going to be something that prohibits that accidental key up that might occur with Vox, right? If Vox comes in, we know when we key up on Vox, hey, I hear this, I'm going to key up, we're going to send it down the line. That's going to be different with CTCSS detect and core detect. CTCSS detect is going to be, you're going to have to see that exact specific CTCSS tone, activate out of that radio, and then go into that pin on there. And then core detect is carrier operated relay. When the radio starts to receive, some radios have an output there that will go either active high or active low to say, hey, I'm receiving a signal. That then will go to this here. That will then trip the radio, or I should say trip this device to saying, oh, hey, there's a signal here and it's one I need to listen to. Now I'm going to go ahead and listen on the audio pairs for this device on there. Now, it does have mic in for DC and mic in for AC, which is really nice because some radios you need to couple out that DC noise or you couple out that AC noise. That's where sometimes when you get wiring these things, you have that little hum or buzz. It gives you those two on there. So I'm going to go ahead and try to adjust it there, see if my camera will do it there. Not having any luck there. There we go. So pin number 9 is mic in DC and 21 is mic in AC. So if you need to filter out some DC or AC hum, you can use there. Now going along, you have the EEPROM inputs and outputs on there. You have 5 volts DC output. So yeah, it's 5 volts DC, but it's not going to be a lot of, it's going to be milliamps. It's not going to be something to really drive anything on there. So just be careful, especially on devices like this. If they're giving you power out, it's not going to be a lot of amperage. So use that in mind when you're thinking there. So we're going to move that back up there. As you see, you have ground pins on there. Let's see if I can really get that in there. There you go. You got ground pins on there. Now, here's the other cool part. You have channel pins number 22 and 23, which is left out and right out. Now, what that means is coming a left channel and a right channel audio out of this device to feed things. So what that could mean is that you, in essence, have two sides of audio that you can start to deal with on here. So what you're saying in this case is that, hey, you have audio coming out of here that you need to feed in. Well, using a combination, and this is where it gets really technical, and depending on what you're using, you could use some of those GPIO 2 pins to steer the transmitter, to steer which channel you're using, and then you could select the left or right audio channel on there. Now, John, how do I do this? Well, that's going to get more dependent upon what software you're using and how are you integrating this. Most of the time, most people are just going to have PTT and audio out, usually left channel audio out. Then they're going to have core sense detect and then audio in. That's how these things are usually going to be done. But this device here gives you, and I'm going to go focus again, gives you all of these options in there. In addition, you see there's a 6 dB audio out. That's pin number 12, 6 dB audio in. And what those are going to do is that's going to give you your bump of audio. Some radios need that extra increase of audio level to be able to do that. Now, you got to remember this. There's multiple ways to set audios in a situation like this. So thinking if we have the computer, we have this interface device, we have the radio, right? The radio input is going to be that. Maybe there might be settings internally in the radio that you can adjust the microphone input. 9 times out of 10, depending on the radio you're interfacing, especially if you're getting like a cheapy Chinese radio or you're using like an FRS radio or GMRS radio or something, they may not have that mic level that you can adjust on the radio. So now it falls back to here and it falls back to the device driving this device. So the software might have the ability to increase or decrease the audio. But you don't really want to take and drive something hard with audio. You don't want to take that software and crank it all the way up where this has that 6 dB of audio out. Going to try to focus again there. It's like those old pictures that you had to cross your eyes to see there. But so for example, pin 12 out, pin audio out, 6 dB audio out, that's going to reference the audio coming out of here. So this is going to go from audio out here to microphone in on your radio. So instead of cranking your software audio all the way up, maybe you could leave that at mid-range and then use the 6 dB audio out instead of the regular left channel, right channel audio out and this device. And then that way you're not driving this device hard and this device is doing the job that it needs to do. So that's this one here. Once again, DMK Engineering. I'll put the link in the description tonight. USB radio interface, www.dmkeng.com. Once again, www.dmkeng.com, DMK Engineering. Now, I will tell you this about DMK Engineering. I was able to meet them. I bought this directly from them at, oh my goodness, probably back in 2018. Maybe 2017. It was a long time ago. It was a show that was in Torrance, California, I think it was, an amateur radio show. But I had been looking at these devices and I've been going ahead and looking and saying, hey, here's the deal, and this and this. And I said, I'm just going to buy one. I ended up buying 3 total. like I said, I used to use them for All-Star, but now I've started to branch out and use them for other things on there. Now, real quick, before people ask, what did I attach on here? Well, when I do some experimenting, I like to make things easy. So this has a DB25 pin connector, right? So this is the USB cable that comes with it on there. But what I did is I went on Amazon and I found myself a DB25 pin adapter. So I took the cover off there a little bit so I can actually plug things in. I could test pins. But now what I can do is I take this, I plug it into here like so. And now what it is that on there, you see the rows, all the pins are numbered, 1 through 13 and ground, and then 14 through 25. Now what I can do is take these things here, and then I could just do screw down terminals. So I could put the wire in here, screw it down from the top, and now what I can kind of do is almost like make a breadboard for interfacing it to different radios. I've interfaced it to, like, sort of, for example, EF Johnson 5300s. I've interfaced it to Motorola XTLs. I've done Kenwood radios. I've done amateur radios. I've done a whole bunch of different radios. And sometimes it's easier to just go ahead and kind of make a test connection, then document it, and then make your own DB25 pin cable on there. So that's why I have this there, because I know someone's going to ask, going to watch this, and going to say, John, I saw you plug in that. What's the end? This is just basically a breakout pin board on there. Amazon, I think it costs like $5 if that, or something like that on there. So that's product number one. Okay. Now, product number two is a little bit of an interesting product. And the reason I say it's interesting is because it caught my attention. I was walking by a booth in Hamcation. So at Hamcation, there was a amateur radio dealer, and he was selling this device that I'll show you right here. And this is the Digirig Mobile device. And it is this little device right here. Yes, I'm going to put my hand up here. Look at how small that thing is. Little Digirig Mobile device. That's the device here. Basically what this is a basically audio and CAT interface controller and PTT control for different radios. Now, this sells from the Digirig mobile site, digirig.net. So digirig.net. Okay, digirig.net, and then it has all things on there. This little device right here costs you $49.97. We'll show you a little bit more in a minute here, but very, very great, very, very small, compact, easy to use. It has a USB-C port on that end, which goes and plugs into your computer with the cable. They give you a nice little cable with it. I didn't have to buy this. Got chokes on there too, so it eliminates any sort of RF back going into there. On the other end here, so you're going to go ahead and you're going to have two ports on there, audio and serial. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit better. There we go. Audio and serial. Now what these are is these are 3.5 millimeter I believe there's TRRS tip ring sleeve TRSS on there. And what it is that it allows you to take the device and plug it in with a cable, and as you see here, it's a 4-pin, so there's a tip ring sleeve kind of on there. And what you're basically going to do then is you're going to plug the USB into this end, and then depending on the radio make, you plug it into the audio only, and then this plugs into the radio of your choice. So if you have certain radios that follow certain keying aspect or stance on there, then you can go and easily pull that up. You can easily use that radio device to do it. Now, I've experimented with it. I've played with actually it on Zello, as well as connecting this into a radio. So what I did was I opened up my Zello software, plugged this in, plugged it into the computer here and everything like that, plugged that into my radio, and then guess what? I'm going ahead, walking around with my Zello push to talk on my phone here, and then what I'm going ahead and doing is that it's keying that radio. I key up the radio, and it goes out over my handheld that I have that went out to the local repeater and talked in on there. So this is great. This is really super great. So now I'm using that push to talk over cellular to key up a radio. Now, Couple things on it. You saw it was $49.99 for the device on there. So really nice kind of cost on the radio there. Kind of gives you, there's the USB-C once again, and there's the back part on there. Now, one of the things it does have that you can do is you can do the different logic levels. So depending on what you're going to do, if you want to have RS-232 levels, you want to have TX500 levels, so the different transceivers, I just got the basic logic levels on there. Now, one of the things I was like, okay, wait a minute here. I noticed right away that I didn't really like in any way, shape, or form is that it was heavily Voxed based for receive. And that kind of worried me because now, I got to set levels. And what I got to do is I got to set levels on the radio. And here's what it is. What if someone comes by and bumps that radio, right? What if someone comes and hits the volume level? What if all of a sudden, oh shoot, I wanted to change a channel on it because I want to go to a different channel and I set the volume level. I didn't like that. So what I did was I did some research and I actually talked to one of, I'm not exactly sure of his title on it, but he came over to the booth where I was at Hamcation, and he went along and he said, hey, don't worry, we got this for you here and everything that we're willing to show it. This is on their website. This whole schematic diagram is on the website. And what I'll kind of do is here, let me go ahead and see if I can make it, let me make it a little bit bigger screen here. There you go. So this whole thing is your schematic there. So there's the USB side of things that plug into it. Then it goes into the chips here. It even shows you where the codecs and the UARTs are and the reset button and all that kind of stuff. But then this is what I found out interesting here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And what I found out interesting is that on this chip that they're using here, which is a CM108, so they're still using the CM108 chip, where the URIx is using the CM119A. But I saw there were kind of a couple things out on there. So this is the audio PTT. So as you see here right away, it says rig audio frequency out, rig audio frequency in, and the rig PTT. And as you notice here, here's tip. So there it is, TRRS. So tip, ring, and sleeve. And that sleeve is ground. So AF out is going to use the tip and then the sleeve, AF in. So meaning basically the tip and the sleeve in this case is going to do the audio out to the device. The audio in is going to need to use ring 1 and the sleeve, and then the PTT is going to be ring 2 and then the sleeve. So I started to ask myself, I said, hey, you know what? With all this information here, can I build my own? And the guy's like, yeah, you can build your own cable. Here's what it is. And I said, but I said at that time, I was like, you know, God, that really sounds nice. But then I wanted to go ahead and learn a little bit more about how they're doing cat control. So here's the UART control here. So now we see the rig RXD, the rig TXD, 3 volt 3 out, and then there. So now that serial port on there, you have a rig receive data, rig transmit data, and 3 volt 3 out. So 3.3 volts out. So now that's coming off of there. Now, interesting part enough on there, this is where you're going to go ahead and be able to do some of that data points out of there. But I still couldn't find where to get away from that Vox. Right? I couldn't find that. But what I did was I started to notice right here. So off of the CM108 tab here, touch point 4, coming off what it looked like pin 48 here, this is COS. This is CTCSS. So I went along and I said, you know what? I wonder if there is actually a way for me to be able to go ahead and do that and kind of be able to pull that audio out. Now, one thing that started to kind of go through my mind is like, okay, this is a great thing for simplicity, for quick and easy, down and dirty. I need to connect something to my Zello and something on there. But what if I wanted to make this my staple? What if I wanted this to be the way that I interface to Zello, that I want to interface into this? These things were really kind of sort of designed, they kind of are touted as going ahead and saying, you know what? These are interfaces for running data. You want to run WinLink through a handheld. You want to run PSK31, whatever. This is the interface there. But you know what? If it can run data, it can run audio too. But I was having a hard time finding that. So they had those cat commands. So I was like, what can I do? Well, that's where, and I'm going to pull this up, which I think kind of speaks volumes to what's going on here. Under the support tab on the main webpage here, you'll see it says support. It says community form or contact form. So you can contact the contact form, go ahead and ask there, but they got a lot of great resources. Getting started, troubleshooting guides, setting audio levels, the Digi forum, there's a Reddit and a Facebook group. But underneath that support, you can go to this community forum. And voila, look at that. Now I had all this information. And now what I did was I actually responded back here. This is what I did. So here's what I asked. Hey, I'm tempting to contact Digirig. And then he kind of asked me about that. Look at that. I replied 5 hours ago before the taping of the show. So this is Sunday when I'm taping the show. But look at that. He went along and did that on there. So I think it kind of speaks volumes to how this is happening, that they have a forum board, that they have someone that's on there looking forward, talking about different radios and stuff like that on there. I would not be afraid, if I were you, to go ahead and get Digirig if you're looking for some sort of interface device between your computer and there. Now, the best thing I like about Digirig over URIx-B, okay, so basically, if I go ahead and saying, if I compare the two of there, let me pull back up my regular screen here. If I compare the two devices, what I'm really finding a lot better with Digirig than, let me flip it over there the right way, and let me flip this over the right way. If I'm really finding out what I like about Digirig is that right away, without drivers or anything like that, it doesn't need a separate program to do it. I plug this in, the Zello PTT function, when I went in there for setting it up, it recognized it right away as USB. It has some other functions on there. So I was very happy to see that on there. The URIx took a little more finagling. However, I have not tested the Digirig with other sort of devices like the Raspberry Pi, like in an All-Star, an Asterisk environment, or something else in there, where I have with the URIx. So it's really going to come down to see is what kind of interface do we want to do. Right now, from what I've seen, the URIx obviously is a lot easier, 25 pin, I can wire that up, where with the Digirig, I'm going to have to take and build a little bit of a cable using the TRRS connectors on there, and I'll see what was actually set on there to see what exactly is going on from that point there. So, couple things to think about. You wanted to know what I use for Zello interfaces. These are kind of what I'm looking on or using on there. And this is where now that fun of on the tech bench, we can get more granular. It's going to go ahead and break it down. I suggest, once again, if you want to find out more about this stuff, go to Digirig, that's DIGIRIG.net, or go to DMKENG.com. That's where you're going to find this URIx-B interface, the B version now, and this is where you're going to find the Digirig mobile device. Digirig, you can buy these directly from both of those websites there, so no worry about it. They give you a warranty, and they are both very helpful for interfacing tips. But you know what? Tonight would not be a regular episode if it wasn't for our weekly section. You know what really bends my antenna? Is when I get caught in the car door when I'm on duty. Jesus, I hate that. Anyways, that's one of the things. But what really bends my antenna is this aspect of what we were thinking about, is saying that, you know what, if you're using the internet, you're not really using radio. Well, that's wrong. Really, in a way, it really kind of is wrong on there. First of all, the internet is never going to go away. It's not. You may lose your access to the internet. As I saw people and friends down in Illinois this past, I believe this weekend, they showed pictures of a cell tower that went down and people lost the internet, lost their cell phone service. Right. You in that area lost your cell phone service with the internet. You did. The internet didn't stop. It didn't. And why I'm kind of very stressing on that is because a lot of stuff is being moved to push to talk over cellular. Infrastructure costs a lot of money. It does. If you were to take a look at what it costs now, repeaters are expensive. Commercial repeaters and stuff like that, and especially with these components, this is microchips and all this kind of stuff like that on there and crap like that, you are looking at about $2,000 for an average good duty repeater. That's not counting duplexers. That's not counting antenna. That's not counting cabling. That's not counting the installation, the labor, all that kind of stuff like that on there. And then once you get it up and running, Now what you have to do is you have to buy handheld devices or mobiles or something like that to be able to go ahead and talk on those things on there. So guess what? It does cost a lot of money. But now the question always comes into, when we talk about communications, how can we help defer or offset cost but not cut corners? And this is a thing that public safety has dealt with for ages. This is a thing that business has dealt with ages. One of my first experiences, and I'll give you an example why I'm saying this, is my first experience when I was younger, when I was thriving with knowledge about radios, when I was 12 and I was like, all this kind of stuff like that, is I went along and I was in Chicago and I noticed these bicycle messenger people had the strap on there, and on the strap on there, they had a radio with an antenna. Guess what? This was kind of pre-cell phones. This was kind of an era where there were cell phones, but they were bag phones and they looked like you were calling it an airstrike, right? But how did you do that? Well, guess what? They were on trunked radio networks. Now, that may have been good back in that day because basically there wasn't cell phones and people weren't screwing around and everything like that on cell phones, right? But those were still pretty costly devices. Well, guess what? The cost of radios have increased as then. That handheld probably was easily $600-700 to talk on that trunk network. Today's equivalent, it probably would be around $1,000 or so. Why do you need such an expensive radio? Well, because of trunking and because of digital technologies and blah, 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 right? But here's what starts to run in. Here's what starts to happen on things on there is that are you going to go ahead and spend money on radios that might only work in certain areas for coverage? I can't answer that question yes or no for you because you need to answer that yourselves based on your communication need. However, I can tell you that there needs to be a marrying of the two networks together. In areas where there's no cellular coverage, RF coverage is going to be the greatest thing since sliced white bread. It is. And if you are on a business network, if you are on something, guess what? They will allow you to purchase time on a system. I can purchase time on a system. And guess what? As long as I have coverage on there, I pay a flat rate to take my handheld and talk any single time I want on my talk group, on my channel, whatever the case or the network that you're using is on there. But there are going to be times that you travel outside of your network. Or more so, are you really want to going ahead and paying $600, $700, $800 for a handheld radio or God forbid a mobile radio for someone who's going to leave it in the truck, leave it in the car, drop it, lose it, something like that. And now, guess what? You need to go ahead and if you're renting that, you're screwed. You got to pay it back. Or if you purchased it, you're even more screwed because now you need to get a new one if you don't have insurance on there. If people are already on their phones, why can't you allow them to have push-to-talk service? And when I say push-to-talk service, I mean things like Zello or other services out there, which basically turns your phone into a two-way radio device. It allows you to basically say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and push a button on the screen of my phone, or maybe some phones even have buttons now that are dedicated to being a push-to-talk button. And when I key that button, push that button, when I key the telephone, the PTT device, now what that's going to do is it's going to go through the network and it's going to go to that gateway and it's going to go out and talk to the people on the actual RF side. So why is that a problem? Well, it's not a problem, but it's showing that there are two different types of radio networks that exist. Because your cell phone device doesn't necessarily go ahead and connect directly to them, doesn't mean that it's not an RF device. There are no wires off your cell phone. Whether you're going through the cellular network or whether you're using the Wi-Fi, you're using RF signals. It just is in a different type of format than actually having a two-way radio. But the case that comes to the point is people are saying, that's not true radio. That's not true radio. Well, what is the definition of radio? When you're talking about radio, what is two-way radio? Yeah, it's a wireless device that can communicate with two people. Besides going ahead and having a simplex or a direct channel or a talk-around channel, guess what? Your radio is going to go through that tower. So in the case of this past weekend, when that cell tower bent over and stuff like that on there and people lost cell phone service, guess what? If your radio network was on it too, you're going to be SOL. And that's blank out of luck too, because your antenna up there by the cellular antennas has now suffered rapid deceleration and is taking a dirt nap. So don't just discount it. Once again, the internet is always readily available. It really is. Just because you don't have access doesn't mean the internet stops. It just means that your access to the internet doesn't stop. Now, what is an ultimate solution? Well, the ultimate solution is to have two of the devices. Have a push-to-talk device. Have an actual two-way radio device if you want to. Well, John, you just said about saving money. Yeah, but if that's what you need to have as comfort, then have that as comfort. The data networks outreach quite a ways, more so than I think really people think about or exist. Many actual commercial installations to connect different sites and stuff like that. Guess what? They may have one great high site, let's say downtown Minneapolis, and then they may have one great high site about 50 miles north of Minneapolis and 50 miles east of Minneapolis. Well, guess how they're connected, folks? The internet. And guess what happens if the internet goes down? Then people stay to that one network. So just because you happen to be using a two-way radio device that is actual radio that's RF doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to suffer if there's an outage of the internet for your access. So think about it that way and kind of keep that in the mind that really you don't lose the internet, you lose your access. And that's what this week's Bends My Antenna is all about. So until then, everybody, we're going to say 73. Have a good evening. We're going to be 10-7, all those fun little things, codes we can use and everything like that. If you have a cigar, enjoy it. We are getting some more. Hey, because we're in Wisconsin and we just like the snow and the rain so much as this episode's going on. We've had snow and we've had rain, but I promise you good weather is coming right around the corner. So until then, start thinking about your cigars, start picking out your cigars, and go ahead then and get them ready, because when that nice weather comes, if you got them, go ahead and smoke and enjoy them. Until then, everyone, stay safe, and we'll see you then.